Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Jason Carter never imagined his life would turn upside down on a Sunday afternoon. He was sitting on the living room couch when Hannah, his wife who was 4 months pregnant, came over with a smile he couldn't quite read. She was holding her phone and seemed excited about something. Jason paused the football game he was watching and looked at her curiously. Hannah sat down beside him and started talking about the baby they were expecting, about how important it was to choose the right godfather, someone who could be a positive role model in their child's life. So far, everything seemed normal. But then she dropped the bomb. "I've been thinking about asking Miles to be the godfather," she said casually, as if she were commenting on the weather. Jason's stomach tightened. Miles Turner was Hannah's ex-boyfriend, from a relationship that had lasted 3 years before she'd met Jason. "And you know, I'd also like to give our son his name. Miles is a nice name, and it would be a way to honor my first love," she added, still smiling. Jason froze. He couldn't react right away. He felt a mix of anger, confusion, and a deep ache in his chest he couldn't explain. This wasn't just about a name or a godfather. It was about respect, about what their marriage meant, about his own identity as a husband and father. Hannah took his silence as agreement and kept talking about how wonderful it would be to have Miles involved in the baby's life, as if Jason didn't even exist in that equation. That night, Jason barely slept. He lay next to Hannah, listening to her calm breathing as she slept without a care, while his mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. Something was wrong. Very wrong. It wasn't normal for a pregnant woman to want to give her current husband's child the name of her ex-boyfriend. None of it made any sense, unless there was something he didn't know. The next day, Jason called Grant Foster, a friend from college who'd been a cop and now worked as a private investigator. Grant answered on the second ring and immediately sensed from Jason's voice that something serious was going on. They arranged to meet at a quiet cafe downtown. When Jason told him the whole story, Grant fell silent for a few seconds before speaking. "Look, I hope I'm wrong, but this smells like betrayal." "No woman makes a suggestion like that without a reason," Grant said, looking his friend straight in the eye. Jason felt his world collapse, but he knew he needed the truth. "I need proof. I can't accuse my pregnant wife without being sure," he replied, his voice shaking. Grant agreed and explained he'd run a full investigation, but Jason would have to stay calm at home and act normally so as not to raise suspicion. The next few days were the hardest of Jason's life. He'd wake up, make breakfast for Hannah, take her to doctor's appointments, listen to her plans for the nursery, and pretend everything was fine. Inside, he was slowly dying. Every smile from her felt like a stab, every time she mentioned the name Miles was like poison in his veins. But he kept up the act because he knew he had to see this story through to the end. A week passed like an entire year. Grant called and asked to meet again, but this time his voice was serious and heavy. When Jason arrived at the detective's office, he found a brown folder on the desk. Grant slid it toward him and simply said, "I'm sorry, man." Jason opened the folder with trembling hands. The first photos showed Hannah and Miles entering a downtown hotel together. There were more pictures, the two of them walking hand in hand in a park, sharing an ice cream cone. There were videos too, recorded by Grant from a distance, showing them passionately kissing before getting into her car. Tears streamed down Jason's face uncontrollably. Everything made sense now. The outrageous request, the ex-boyfriend's name, the invitation to be godfather. Hannah wasn't just cheating on him, she was carrying Miles's child and wanted Jason to raise it as his own. It was a cruelty he never imagined anyone could be capable of. But Jason wasn't the same naive man who'd blindly trusted his wife anymore. He knew exactly what he had to do. He gathered the evidence and went home with a plan in mind. When he got there, Hannah was in the kitchen making dinner. He walked up behind her, hugged her, and kissed her neck. She smiled and said she loved him. Jason replied that he loved her too, but inside, he was completely dead. That night, after dinner, Jason sat down beside Hannah on the couch and started the conversation that would change everything. "Hannah, I need to show you something," he said calmly, pulling out his phone and showing her the photos. Her face went pale instantly. She tried to grab the phone, but Jason pulled it away. "You cheated on me. With Miles. The same Miles you want as godfather of our child," he said, each word landing like a verdict. Hannah burst into uncontrollable sobs. At first, she denied everything, saying the photos were old and meant nothing. But when Jason showed her the videos with recent timestamps, she changed tactics. She said it was a mistake, a moment of weakness, that she never meant to hurt anyone, that she still loved him deeply. Jason listened in silence, waiting for her to finish her speech full of empty apologies. Then he asked the question he needed to ask. "Is this child mine, Hannah?" The silence that followed was deafening. Hannah opened her mouth to respond, but no sound came out. Tears streamed down her face as she struggled to find words that might save the situation. "Yes, I swear it's yours," she finally said, but her trembling voice gave away the lie. Jason stood up and walked to the window. He stared out at the dark street for a few minutes before turning back to her. "Here's what we're going to do. There's a test called a non-invasive prenatal DNA test that can be done during pregnancy without risking the baby. If you're really telling the truth, if this child is mine, I'll forgive you for everything. We'll forget this ever happened and move forward. But if you're lying, Hannah, if this child isn't mine, then there's nothing left between us." Hannah panicked. She cried even harder, begged him not to do it, insisted it was unnecessary because she was certain the baby was his. But Jason wouldn't budge. It was either the test or an immediate divorce. Cornered and out of options, Hannah agreed to take the test. The days waiting for the results were tense. Jason temporarily moved into the guest room and barely spoke to Hannah. She tried to get close, cooked his favorite meals, left sweet notes, but he was immune to any show of affection. His mind was focused on just one thing, finding out the truth. When the envelope with the results arrived in the mail, Jason was home alone. His hands shook as he opened it. He read the result once, twice, 3 times, just to be sure he wasn't misreading it. There it was, in clear, straightforward letters: probability of paternity, 0%. He wasn't the father. Jason sat on the living room floor and let the tears fall freely. It wasn't just sadness, it was anger, disappointment, the feeling that he'd wasted years of his life on someone capable of such deception. When Hannah came home a few hours later, she found Jason sitting at the kitchen table with the test results in front of him. She didn't need to ask anything. One look at his face told her everything the paper said. She started talking rapidly, making up absurd excuses, saying maybe the test was wrong and they needed to do another one. Jason simply pushed the paper toward her and walked out of the room. But Jason wasn't a man who did things halfway. If Hannah wanted to destroy their marriage, he'd make sure everyone knew the truth. He scanned the photos, the videos, and the DNA results and prepared a message. He had a family group chat with over 100 people, parents, uncles, cousins, grandparents from both sides. At 8 o'clock that evening, Jason sent everything to the group with a simple note: "So everyone knows the truth about who Hannah Mitchell really is." What followed was absolute chaos. Hannah's phone didn't stop ringing for a second. Messages poured in from every direction, calls, voice notes. Her family was shocked. Her mother called in tears demanding explanations. Jason's family reacted with anger and outrage. His father said he should have sent the evidence sooner. But Jason didn't stop there. He searched social media and discovered that Miles was married. He found his wife's profile, her name was Rebecca, and sent her all the evidence too. Rebecca replied in less than 10 minutes. "Thank you for showing me who I really married," she wrote, and Jason knew he wasn't alone in his pain. 2 days later, Miles received divorce papers. Rebecca didn't want to hear excuses, apologies, or second chances. She simply ended the marriage and moved on. Desperate and scared by the situation, Miles tried calling Hannah repeatedly, but she wouldn't answer. He showed up at the house she and Jason shared, but Jason met him at the door. The two men stared at each other for a few seconds before Jason spoke. "The child is yours. Hannah is 4 months pregnant with your baby. Now you're going to take responsibility." Miles turned pale. He tried to deny it, saying he couldn't be sure and needed tests. Jason tossed a copy of the DNA results at his chest. "It's not mine. And you two were meeting right around the time of conception. Do the math." Miles picked up the paper from the ground and walked away without another word. In the weeks that followed, Miles tried to convince Hannah to start a relationship. After all, she was carrying his child, he'd just gotten divorced because of her. It seemed logical to try building something together. But Hannah flatly refused. She didn't want Miles, she wanted Jason. She wanted the comfortable life she'd had with him, the nice house, financial stability, the respect of their community. Miles had none of that to offer. Miles, however, didn't run from his responsibility. Even though he wasn't in a relationship with Hannah, he said he'd take on fatherhood. He attended some medical appointments and made it clear he'd be present in the child's life. It wasn't what he'd planned for his future, but it was the right thing to do. Meanwhile, Jason was packing his bags. He couldn't live in that town anymore, where everyone knew the story, where people looked at him with pity, where every street corner held a memory of Hannah. He secured a transfer to a branch office in another city, over 500 miles away. He sold the house, divided their assets as his divorce lawyer directed, loaded his things into his car, and drove away. The new city was smaller and quieter. Jason rented a simple apartment and started over from scratch. In the first few months, he woke up every night with nightmares about Hannah and Miles. He'd toss and turn for hours, replaying every detail of the betrayal, every lie, every moment when he should have seen the signs. But slowly, with therapy and physical and emotional distance, Jason began to heal. He met new people at work, formed genuine friendships, and returned to hobbies he'd abandoned during his marriage. He started running every morning, learned to cook new dishes, and adopted a dog who accompanied him on walks through the city parks. Life was beginning again, slowly, but it was happening. A year after everything went down, Jason was at a local coffee shop when he got a message from an unknown number. It was Rebecca, Miles's ex-wife. She was passing through town for work and asked if he'd like to grab coffee. Jason hesitated for a moment, but something inside told him to say yes. When they met, they realized they shared more than just the pain of betrayal. They talked for hours about their experiences, how they'd handled everything, and the challenges of rebuilding their lives after something like that. There was a genuine connection between them, a kind of understanding only someone who'd been through something similar could offer. They started talking regularly, first through texts, then video calls. Rebecca traveled a lot for work, and whenever she passed through Jason's city, they'd meet up. It wasn't romance, at least not at first. It was friendship, companionship, someone who understood exactly what the other had been through without needing explanations. Months went by, and that friendship deepened into something more. Neither of them was looking for love, both were too cautious after everything they'd been through. But love has a funny way of showing up when you least expect it. On a rainy night, when Rebecca was back in town, they finally admitted what they felt for each other. Their relationship grew in a healthy, respectful way. There were no lies, no secrets. Both had learned the hard way the value of honesty and transparency. Jason discovered it was possible to trust again, that not everyone was like Hannah. Rebecca realized she deserved to be truly loved, not just when it was convenient. Hannah, according to rumors that reached Jason through mutual acquaintances, was raising the child alone. Miles paid child support and saw the kid on weekends, but there was no relationship between them beyond parental responsibility. She'd lost everything, the husband, her family's respect, the comfortable life she'd had, all because of selfish, thoughtless choices. One night, late, Hannah sent Jason a long message. She begged for forgiveness, said she'd been the biggest fool in the world, that she'd lost the best man she'd ever known. Jason read the message, sighed deeply, and blocked her number. There was nothing left to say. Forgiveness didn't mean going back, and he'd learned that some bridges, once burned, shouldn't be rebuilt. The lesson Jason took from that painful experience wasn't about betrayal or lies, it was about his own worth. He learned he deserved to be truly loved, without games or manipulation. He learned it was possible to trust again, but that it also took courage to investigate when something didn't feel right. He learned that exposing the truth, no matter how painful, was better than living a lie. And most importantly, he learned that starting over wasn't a sign of weakness, it was a sign of strength. Because only the strong can leave an entire life behind and build something new from the ground up, carrying their scars but refusing to let them define who they are. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.
Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Tyler was never the kind of guy who let doubts eat at him for weeks. When something bothered him, he acted. It had always been that way, both in business and in his personal life. To some, it seemed impulsive. To him, it was just about not wasting time. And time was exactly what he started noticing slipping through his fingers when Rachel, his wife of 7 years, decided to enter a new phase, deep self-care. It happened almost overnight. Suddenly, the woman who used to doze off on the couch beside him during TV shows began waking up early to meditate. She bought a purple yoga mat, scented incense, and locked herself in the home office, saying she needed silence for her practices. Yoga is transformation, Ty. It's about listening to your body, you know, she'd say in that soft, measured tone that sounded almost rehearsed. The first time he really found it odd was when she showed up in brand new workout clothes, saying she'd discovered an excellent YouTube channel with yoga classes. But what really caught his attention was the perfume, not the scent itself, but the fact that she was wearing it to exercise alone at home. Nobody puts on Chanel at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday just to stretch. Rachel, on the other hand, seemed increasingly distant. She avoided physical contact, saying she needed emotional space and that Tyler had become too practical, too closed off. You don't share anything with me anymore, Ty. You only talk about work and projects. I need more. He listened, but inside him something whispered that there was another reason behind this sudden distance. It wasn't just yoga. It wasn't just personal rediscovery. His suspicion really took hold when, by chance, he saw the name Greg pop up in a notification while her phone was charging on the dining table. Tyler had gotten up to refill his water glass when the screen lit up. "Greg, you won't regret it. Trust me." That was strange. Rachel swore she barely exchanged 2 words with his former business partner, the same Greg with whom Tyler had co-founded his first company years earlier and had a bitter falling out. While Tyler stood for ethics and transparency, Greg chased shortcuts and easy profits. They'd parted ways in anger. And Rachel? She'd never seemed particularly close to him, at least not in front of Tyler. But there it was, his name on her screen, with a message that sounded far too intimate to be casual. That was enough to reignite everything. That same day, Tyler went on Amazon and bought a motion sensor security camera kit. He installed everything on Saturday while Rachel went out for a walk to clear her mind. One camera in the garage corner, another at the side entrance, and a third, nearly invisible, in the hallway. And, as always, he didn't say a word. On Monday, Tyler told Rachel he'd be out all day. He left early, grabbed coffee at the corner gas station, and parked behind the supermarket. At 10:23 a.m., his phone vibrated, motion detected. On the screen, Greg walked in through the garage with a spare key, glancing around with the familiarity of someone who felt he belonged there. The betrayal hit cold and precise, like a blade between the ribs. This was the man Tyler had shared debts with, dreams with, and that first office rented on a credit card. Now he was in Tyler's house, stealing something that couldn't be given back. Tyler took a deep breath. His heart pounded in his throat, but he didn't get out of the car. Anger was easy. Intelligence was rarer. He only returned late that afternoon, after Rachel had finished her spiritual retreat. She talked about peace, inner silence, how her body was responding better. Tyler just nodded, eyes fixed, his silence now sharp as a razor. That night, Tyler announced he'd be visiting his mother in Asheville the next morning. "That's great, you reconnecting with family too," Rachel said, smiling with that practiced calmness, almost theatrical. Everything seemed too perfect to be true. Later, lying beside her in the dark, he felt sadness, but mostly relief. His gut hadn't misled him. And as for Greg? He'd just signed his own sentence. The next morning, Tyler rented a hotel room, opened his laptop, and reviewed the recordings. He saw Rachel smile at Greg in the hallway, a smile he hadn't seen in months. They kissed in the corridor, spoke with intimacy, and she touched his chest like she was rediscovering familiar ground. The most humiliating part was watching them laugh, as if it were all just a fun game, as if Tyler didn't exist. But he did exist. And he was watching everything. He didn't break anything. Didn't yell. He simply created an anonymous email, attached 3 videos, and sent them to the board members of their old company. In the subject line, he wrote only, "Would you invest your money in him?" He closed the laptop. Smiled. Not out of vengeance, but out of clarity. When he got home, Rachel was reading a book about self-awareness. "How was your visit with your mom?" she asked without looking up. "Revealing," he replied. "Sometimes you need distance to see what was right in front of you." She nodded, unaware that at that very moment, the ground had already vanished beneath her feet. "Nice yoga session today," he said, his voice calm, almost cold. Rachel opened her eyes, surprised. "You're back early. Is something wrong with your mom?" Tyler sat down quietly and calmly responded with another question. "Does Greg still wear that cheap almond-scented cologne? The same one he wore that night in Charlotte, before trying to get me to sign that shady contract?" Rachel froze. The book slipped from her fingers. "How did you?" "Because I saw you smile when he walked into the garage this morning. I saw you touch his chest like it was yours. I saw you two laughing at me." He tossed his phone onto the table with the video paused. "Care to explain?" he asked, his voice low and restrained, but carrying a weight she'd never heard before. She swallowed hard and started stammering. "Tyler. It's not what it looks like." He let out a quiet, bitter laugh. "Oh, no? Then explain what it is." "Greg walking in here like he owns the place. While I'm gone, you're meditating." Rachel tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't obey. She spoke in broken sentences, offering confused justifications about loneliness, emptiness, a tough phase. Tyler raised his hand, cutting her off. "I don't care about your phase. You cheated on me. And you did it with the one man I despise most. Congratulations on your choice." She was crying now, hands trembling. "I still love you, Ty. I didn't want it to be like this. You wanted it exactly like this." He took a deep breath, grabbed the jacket hanging on the chair. "And now you'll deal with the consequences." Rachel stepped toward him, trying to grab his arm. "Please, don't do this, we can work it out." He turned, looking her in the eyes for the last time that day. "Rachel, it's over. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow. You'll get the papers. I'm staying at a hotel until everything's settled. Good luck with your yoga mat. He walked past her and left without slamming the door. Rachel stood alone in the middle of the office, the frozen image of Greg in the garage still heavy in her mind. The incense burned, but the smell now made her queasy. Everything she thought she controlled had crumbled in minutes. That night, Tyler slept in a simple hotel downtown. He didn't want friends or explanations, just silence and a neutral room to think. Meanwhile, Rachel spent the night calling non-stop, sending messages he never answered. Her life had changed in an afternoon, and she knew what came next would be even worse. Because unlike other husbands who wait weeks to gather proof, Tyler had already made his decision. There would be no reconciliation, no "let's talk." The game ended the exact moment she was exposed. In the days following the discovery, Rachel scrambled like someone trying to patch a burning house with duct tape. She cried, sent long messages, tried calling Tyler every hour. No response. At night, she'd sit on the edge of the bed waiting for some sign, from the phone, the door, God. But nothing came. Meanwhile, Tyler kept silent. He'd settled into a discreet hotel on the other side of town and spent his days talking to his lawyer and sorting out the divorce details. He didn't want a scandal, just justice and a dignified ending. But something inside him kept nagging that one piece was still missing for the whole story to make sense. The betrayal was clear, but the motive, that still itched like glass splinters under his skin. Then, on a cloudy afternoon, Tyler's lawyer called. "Can you come by? We received a curious document. It came from your old company." When Tyler arrived, he was handed a copy of an email forwarded by one of the partners from the old firm, where Greg had tried to reposition himself as an investor. In the message body, one line read, "I have full support from someone very close to Tyler. She knows where he's vulnerable and has given me useful information for this new phase." Tyler's blood ran cold. The anger, already tamed by emotional exhaustion, flared up again. Rachel hadn't just betrayed him as a husband, she'd betrayed him professionally too. She'd given Greg information about him, things he'd said at home, details from a time when he'd trusted her completely. The betrayal ran deeper than he'd imagined. That same night, Tyler broke his silence. He called Rachel. "I need you home tomorrow at 7 p.m. We're having one last conversation," he said, flatly. Rachel replied with a stifled sob. "I'll be there. Thank you for giving me this chance." But what she thought would be a reconciliation talk was anything but. At the appointed time, Tyler walked into the house like a stranger. He carried a leather folder and an expression stripped of any nostalgia. Rachel, made up, neatly combed, wearing the same outfit from their honeymoon as if that could turn back time, gave him a timid smile. "Tyler." He raised his hand, signaling it wasn't time to talk yet. He sat at the kitchen table, opened the folder, and pulled out the divorce papers. "You know there's no going back. What I saw, what I read, can't be unseen." She tried to argue. "I was confused. I felt alone. I thought you saw me as part of the furniture. And so you got back at me by handing my life over to Greg," he cut in, voice sharp. Rachel stood still. How do you know about that?" He pulled out the printed email and placed it on the table. She looked. Turned pale. I didn't say anything serious. I just mentioned things I'd heard you say. Nothing confidential." "Rachel, you gave company information to the man who destroyed my trust. You betrayed everything. In every possible way." She tried to defend herself, saying it wasn't malicious, that Greg had manipulated her, that she never thought it would have consequences. "I just wanted to be heard, to feel important again." Tyler stood up and looked around. "You wanted attention. And you got it. You became the center of my collapse. Congratulations." She was crying now, shattered. But he was beyond pain, he was in the territory of bitter clarity. You can stay in this house until the process is finalized. But my share of the house is going on the market. And you'll need a good lawyer. Rachel followed him to the door. And us? She murmured. Is there any chance left? Tyler stopped, back turned to her. Not after seeing you laugh with him in that video. Not after learning you used my words against me. Not after realizing you just wanted someone to inflate your ego. He turned his head slightly. I was your partner. And you treated me like an obstacle. He left without looking back. In the days that followed, Rachel tried everything: letters, messages, calls. She even reached out to Tyler's parents, who already knew everything. The answer was always the same: silence. And this silence was very different from the one she claimed had suffocated her before. This one was final. Imminent. As for Greg, well, the anonymous email Tyler sent to the old company's board spread faster than Greg could have imagined. The video of him entering Tyler's house ended up in the hands of the lead investor, who immediately scrapped any future partnership. Greg's reputation turned to smoke. Nobody wanted to work with him anymore. His new phase crumbled to dust. Meanwhile, Tyler rebuilt himself. He rented an apartment near the city's business district and began structuring his new business venture, smaller, leaner, but entirely his own. Every new client felt like another brick rebuilding his self-worth. In court, Tyler's lawyer presented the videos, emails, and statements showing Rachel had used their joint credit card to pay for hotels and dinners with Greg, expenses that didn't benefit the marriage. The judge deemed this marital waste and adjusted the asset split. Tyler received 65% of the liquid assets. Rachel kept the car but had to sell her personal jewelry to cover her share of the debts. Betrayal doesn't justify punishment, the judge said, but misuse of marital assets does. Tyler chose to sell the house. He clearly had no place there anymore. And it was there, hearing the verdict, that Rachel finally understood. What had started as just a moment of weakness had ruined the life she'd known. And Tyler barely glanced at her in court. He was too focused on what came next. 6 months after the hearing, Rachel lived in a modest rental, far from the neighborhood where she used to strut in workout clothes with a serene smile. Friends had drifted away, her social circle evaporated, and event invitations vanished like dust in the wind. She worked part-time at a handmade candle shop, ironically, the same kind of candles she used to light during her morning meditations, now with a very different meaning. The scent of lavender no longer brought peace. It brought memories. In the shop's narrow aisles, she sometimes overheard customers whispering when they recognized her, wasn't she married to that architect? She pretended not to hear. Avoided mirrors. Avoided people. And especially avoided any mention of Greg's name. As for him, the former partner, he, too, experienced ruin in layers. After the videos and emails leaked among investors, he was blacklisted from 3 projects in a row. He tried launching a consultancy, but contacts melted away like ice in the sun. Nobody wanted to be associated with him. The man who prided himself on understanding people now found himself ignored even by strangers. He started frequenting cheap bars, pitching ideas in impromptu meetings, and even slept a few nights in a borrowed office from a childhood friend who still felt sorry for him. Tyler, on the other hand. Tyler thrived. Settled in a modern downtown loft, he opened his own architecture studio with a different approach, ethics, transparency, and genuine connection with clients. At first, he got skeptical looks. The divorce was still fresh gossip in business circles. But over time, his talent, firm stance, and straightforward manner rebuilt the respect he deserved. And more, now he was fully in control, himself and no one else. Success came slowly but steadily. Within a year, his studio had completed 2 award-winning projects and landed a feature in a specialized magazine. In the interview, when asked about his professional turnaround, Tyler replied, Sometimes, demolition is necessary before reconstruction. Rachel read those words with tears in her eyes, sitting on the floor of her small apartment, the printed article trembling in her hands. It was night. She hesitated. Took a deep breath. And for the first time in months, gathered the courage to send Tyler a message. I know I'm the last person who has any right to ask for anything, but I'm struggling. Can you help me with something, please? Even if it's just work. I know you'll never look at me the same way again. I just need a chance to get back on my feet. She hit send. Then deleted the chat history, as if that made what she'd just done less humiliating. She didn't expect a reply. But he responded. The next day, she received an email from a career placement agency. Tyler had paid for 3 months of coaching and a certification course in property management. At the bottom, a simple note: you asked for a chance. It's not mine to give, but I can open a door. The rest is up to you. Rachel read it, cried, and for the first time felt shame, not for having fallen, but for expecting someone else to lift her up. She accepted, not with cheap gratitude or hope for forgiveness, but with the humility of someone who finally understood, far too late, the weight of her choices. She took the course. Got the job at the condo. Never spoke to Tyler again. But she knew that even after she destroyed everything, he still believed she could start over. That alone was more than she deserved. One morning, while sorting papers in the lobby, she saw an elegantly dressed young woman drop off an envelope at the front desk. It was from Tyler's studio. His firm had been hired to modernize the building. She turned away before the woman could recognize her. A chill ran through her stomach. That was the life she could have had. But it wasn't hers anymore. Tyler never contacted Rachel again. Over time, he relearned how to trust, not others, but his own judgment. Today, his studio has an unwritten rule: no contracts without coffee first. No partnerships without shared silence. He never remarried. But sometimes, on Sunday mornings, he walks alone through the park and smiles, remembering that his greatest victory wasn't rebuilding, it was discovering that, even alone, he was enough. Greg? He vanished from the radar. Not with a bang, but with the awkward silence of someone who's lost not just their reputation, but the right to be remembered. Some swear he moved to rural Florida, selling retirement plans to wary retirees. Others say he still shows up in cheap co-working spaces, pitching disruptive ideas to people who don't know his past. But the truth is, once the world turns its back, nobody asks where you fell. And nobody truly bothers to look. Tyler had bet everything on the woman he believed would be by his side forever. And when he realized he was alone, he understood something that would change everything from that point on. Trust isn't lost all at once. It gets scratched away bit by bit, until one day it collapses. And when that happens, it's not the end of love, it's the end of respect. And without respect, there's no coming back. Tyler learned that the hard way. But he emerged whole on the other side. And that's the real victory. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.
Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Thomas Morrison watched his wife through the living room window's reflection as she made breakfast. 22 years of marriage had created an intimacy that needed no words. He knew every gesture, every sigh, every smile. Or at least he thought he did. It all started innocently, almost imperceptibly, like most tragedies do. When Lucas, their youngest, left for college the previous fall, Abigail got that distant look Thomas recognized from mothers whose kids had finally flown the nest. The house, once full of young voices and chaotic energy, suddenly felt too big, too quiet. "I'm going to start working out," she announced one September morning. "Just to keep myself busy, you know. Lose a few pounds." Thomas thought it was a great idea. At 45, they could both stand to be more active. He even suggested they do it together, but work always found an excuse, meetings that ran late, deadlines piling up, the usual grind of a mid-level manager at a company that took more than it gave. For the first few months, the changes were subtle. Abigail lost a few pounds, bought colorful workout clothes, and chatted enthusiastically about her spinning and Pilates classes. Thomas supported her, proud to see his wife with a new sense of purpose. She smiled more, had more energy. It felt like the start of a new chapter for both of them, a rediscovery after years spent raising their kids. But something shifted when winter gave way to spring. Abigail started spending more time at the gym. 2 hours a day turned into 3, then 4. Her diet, once balanced, became obsessive. She weighed every bite, counted every calorie, and refused to eat dinner with Thomas, claiming she'd eaten at the wrong time or the wrong things. Her body changed dramatically, muscles defined, body fat dropped to impressive levels, and her silhouette took on that glossy fitness magazine look. Thomas tried talking to her. "Honey, you're getting obsessed. Maybe it's time to ease up a little." "Obsessed?" She laughed, a strange sound he didn't recognize. "For the first time in my life, I'm taking care of myself. 20 years spent on the kids, the house, you. Now it's my turn." There was an edge in those words that cut him deeply. The hallway mirror, once just a surface for hurried glances, became the altar where Abigail offered hours of worship. She studied herself from every angle, flexed her muscles, fixed her hair, practiced expressions. Thomas caught her more than once taking sensual selfies, posing in ways that made him feel like an intruder in his own home. "You look beautiful," he said one night, trying to reconnect. "You always have, but now." "Now I'm more than beautiful," she cut in, staring at her own reflection instead of at him. "I'm spectacular." The Hendersons' birthday party was the turning point. For 20 years, Thomas and Abigail had been that couple. They danced together, sat together, laughed at the same jokes. That night, though, Abigail wore a dress Thomas had never seen, red, tight, revealing. She was transformed, hair professionally styled, flawless makeup, heels that made her nearly as tall as him. "Wow," Thomas whispered as she came down the stairs. "You look different." "Better, you mean?" She twirled, showing off. "Admit it, Thomas. You never imagined you'd be married to a woman like this, did you?" At the party, Thomas became invisible. Abigail was immediately surrounded by men, some single, others not so much. She laughed too loudly, touched arms too familiarly, danced with one man after another while Thomas watched from the sidelines, a warm beer in his hand. "She's just having fun," Karen Wilson said, touching his shoulder with pity. But her eyes said something else. Everyone's eyes did. Thomas saw Michael, his supposed friend, whisper something in Abigail's ear that made her laugh and playfully smack his chest. He saw Richard Wilkins, the wealthy businessman everyone knew was an incorrigible womanizer, run his hand down her back as they danced, and she didn't pull away. When they finally left at 3 in the morning, Abigail was glowing. "That was amazing. Why don't we ever do this? Why aren't you ever that fun?" "I was there," Thomas replied, gripping the steering wheel. "You just weren't with me. Don't be childish. Are you jealous because people noticed me? Sorry if I don't want to be the invisible wife sitting in the corner all night." The silence for the rest of the drive was thick as fog. 3 months passed like slow erosion. Thomas watched helplessly as his wife drifted further away each day. She woke at 5 a.m. to train, spent afternoons at the spa or shopping, and evenings, out with the girls, though Thomas suspected those girls were increasingly male. He tried bringing it up several times, but Abigail was a master at deflecting or accusing him of being controlling, insecure, boring. She slept facing away from him, avoided his touch, and met any show of affection with infuriating condescension. Too little, "Too late syndrome," she said one night after he tried to kiss her. "You had 22 years to make me feel this way. Now that I finally feel desirable, you want my attention?" "I've always wanted you," Thomas protested. "Always." "Not in the way that matters," she shot back, already turning to sleep. The bomb exploded on a Tuesday in June. Thomas was having coffee, bracing himself for another dull day at work and another night of marital loneliness, when Abigail came downstairs. She wore the old blue robe he'd given her for Christmas years ago, a moment of unexpected normalcy that almost made him smile. Then she opened the robe. Underneath, nothing but lingerie, black lace, strategic sheer panels, a set that clearly cost more than he made in a week. Her body, tanned and sculpted, looked like it stepped out of a photo shoot. "What do you think?" She turned slowly, showing off. "Worth it?" "Worth it for what?" Thomas felt his stomach tighten. Abigail sat across from him, crossing her legs theatrically. "Remember when we were young and I said I wanted to travel to Paris? See the Eiffel Tower, walk along the Seine, drink wine at a cafe? I remember. And I always said we'd." "I'm going," she interrupted. "Next week." Thomas's heart raced. "That's wonderful. I'll take some time off and alone." Pause. Well, not exactly alone. The silence that followed was so heavy Thomas struggled to breathe. "I met someone at the gym," Abigail continued, her voice taking on that tone people use when explaining something obvious to a child. "Richard Wilkins. You know him, the tall businessman with the gray hair. He has an apartment in Paris and invited me for a week. It's just once, Thomas. An experience. Then I'll come back to you, and everything goes back to normal. I promise." Thomas stared at her, trying to process the words, to rebuild the world that had just collapsed. "Are you saying, you want an affair? And you want my permission? Don't be so dramatic. It's not an affair. It's an adventure. One last burst of youth before I settle down for good. All my friends say it's normal, that after so many years devoted to family, I deserve this." She leaned in, touching his hand with calculated gentleness. "And I know you love me enough to understand. Love you enough to let you cheat on me?" Thomas's voice came out hoarse. 22 years, Abigail. 22 years of marriage, 2 kids, a whole life together. And you want to throw it all away for a week in Paris with a married man known for collecting women like trophies? "I'm not throwing anything away. It's the opposite, I'm coming back to you renewed, complete. Don't you get it? I spent so long being a mom, being a wife, being the sensible, reliable woman. Now I finally have a body men desire, and I want to experience that. Once. Just once." Thomas stood up, his legs trembling. "You've already decided, haven't you? You're not asking permission, you're telling me." "I'd like your blessing," Abigail said, and for the first time there was a note of uncertainty in her voice. "But yes, I'm going. I deserve this. Then I also deserve to make my own decisions." Thomas grabbed the car keys. "When you get back from Paris, if you come back, you won't find me here. Don't be ridiculous. You're not going anywhere. You love me." "Love," Thomas said, stopping at the door, "doesn't mean being a doormat. Love doesn't mean watching you destroy our family for vanity." He walked out, and for the first time in years, he felt free. The park was empty that Tuesday morning. Thomas sat on the same bench where, 23 years earlier, he'd proposed to Abigail. He remembered it perfectly. She'd worn a yellow dress, the wind played with her brown hair, and when she said, yes, he felt like his life finally made sense. Where had that woman gone? He'd spent the last few hours driving aimlessly, trying to sort through his thoughts. Reality hit him in waves. His wife, the mother of his children, his companion for 2 decades, was planning an affair and expected him to just accept it. Worse, she expected him to love her enough to allow it. Thomas pulled out his phone and made the call he never imagined he'd make. Samuels and Associates, how can I help you? I need a divorce lawyer. The next few days were a painful revelation. The lawyer, a bald, pragmatic man named Robert Samuels, didn't seem surprised by the story. It happens more than you think, he said, flipping through papers. The midlife crisis has become an excuse for selfish behavior. But legally, we're in a strong position, she's admitting to premeditated adultery. Thomas also hired a private investigator, feeling dirty but desperate for the truth. The photos arrived 2 days later, Abigail and Richard Wilkins having lunch at an expensive restaurant on Wednesday, entering a downtown hotel together on Thursday, her laughing in that way she used to reserve just for Thomas. I documented 2 meetings this week, the investigator reported, opening a folder with more details. But I asked around discreetly at the gym, talked to waiters at places they frequent, checked some records. From what I gathered, this has been going on for at least 3 months. And he's known for this, he keeps a wife at home and juggles multiple affairs. Usually goes for married women because there's less drama. Thomas felt sick. When he got home that night, he found suitcases open in the bedroom. Expensive lingerie, dresses he'd never seen, high heels. Abigail was packing for her adventure like it was just another business trip. "Oh, you're back," she said casually. "I was worried." "Where were you?" "Taking care of business." "Thomas, about this morning." "I know it was a shock, but once you think about it rationally, you'll understand. Lots of couples do this nowadays. It's even healthy, it keeps the relationship fresh." He watched her, really watched her for the first time in months. The perfect body, the made-up face, the calculated movements. And he realized, he didn't recognize this person anymore. The woman he'd loved, sweet, attentive, with that sarcastic sense of humor and love for old movies, had been consumed by something predatory and hollow. "Abigail," he said calmly, "you've changed. And not for the better." She laughed. "I've changed for the better, yes. For the first time in my life, I'm confident, sexy, desired. Sorry if that threatens your ego, but I'm not going back to being that boring housewife. That boring housewife was my wife. My best friend. The mother of my children. And I still am. I'm just evolving. You should try it too, instead of wallowing." Thomas slept in the guest room that night. And the next. Abigail tried seducing him once, showing up naked at the door, but he just stared at her indifferently until she gave up, furious. "You'll regret this," she shouted. "When I get back, I might not even want you anymore." "I'll survive," he replied, closing the door. Monday arrived like a scheduled execution. Thomas stayed home, calling work to say he was sick. He watched from the window as a black Mercedes pulled into the driveway. Richard Wilkins stepped out, tanned, confident, wearing a suit that probably cost Thomas's monthly salary. Abigail ran out of the house, radiant in a white dress that made her look like a bride. Thomas saw her throw herself into Richard's arms, saw her kiss him with a passion she hadn't shown him in years. He watched them get into the car, saw her wave at the house, not at him, but at the house, as if temporarily saying goodbye to property. The Mercedes drove off, taking 22 years of marriage with it. Thomas stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then, with deliberate movement, he closed and locked it. Symbolically, finally, he was closing that chapter. In the days that followed, he moved with mechanical purpose. He changed his phone number, telling only the kids and a few close friends. He rented a small but comfortable apartment downtown. He hired movers and took his things from the house, clothes, books, the guitar he'd played when he was young, photos from before Abigail. He also did one other thing. "Are you sure?" Robert Samuels asked, looking over the documents. This will cause quite a scandal. I am, Thomas replied. She wanted her public affair. Let her deal with the public consequences. The photos appeared in the local paper 3 days later, images Abigail herself had proudly posted on social media, her and Richard Wilkins walking hand in hand down the Champs-Élysées, kissing in front of the Eiffel Tower. Thomas didn't have to do much, just one anonymous call to the newspaper's gossip column. The article was devastating: local businessman's romantic getaway with married woman, 30-year wife publicly humiliated. The scandal was immediate and brutal. Victoria Wilkins, Richard's wife of 30 years, gave a tearful interview about betrayal and humiliation. Richard's company lost major contracts. No one wanted to be publicly associated with such a sordid marital scandal. Friends began distancing themselves. And Abigail tried calling. Dozens of times. Desperate messages. Thomas, what did you do? Please answer. I can explain. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. Please, I need to come home. He didn't reply to any of them. He blocked her old number, changed the locks on the house. When she finally returned from Paris, 5 days early, she found the house empty and an envelope on the kitchen table, divorce papers and notice that the property would be sold. The meeting at the lawyer's office was set for a gray Thursday in July. Thomas arrived early, wearing a new suit. He'd lost weight over the past months, not out of obsession like Abigail, but because the pain had stolen his appetite. When she walked in, it was like seeing a ghost of the woman she'd been. Abigail wore a dress she'd probably chosen carefully, elegant but not provocative, subtle makeup, hair simply tied back. She looked tired, and Thomas noted with bitter satisfaction that she'd been crying recently. Thomas, she began, voice trembling, can we talk alone? Just 5 minutes? Everything we need to say can be said here. Please. Tears started falling. I made a terrible mistake. I see that now. But we can get past this, right? 22 years, Thomas. That has to mean something. He looked at her, really looked, and felt nothing. No anger, no love, no pain. Just emptiness where a marriage used to be. It means I wasted 22 years building a life with someone who threw it away for a week in Paris, he said calmly. It wasn't just that. I was confused, scared of getting old, of becoming invisible. You don't understand what it's like to be a middle-aged woman, to watch your body change, to feel like you're disappearing. So you decided to become exactly what you used to despise, Thomas interrupted. An empty woman who's only valued for her body. Congratulations. That's not fair. Fair? For the first time, his voice rose. Was it fair for you to cheat on our marriage and expect me to accept it? Was it fair for you to kiss another man in front of me and leave for a week of confessed adultery? Don't talk to me about fair, Abigail. Robert Samuels cleared his throat. Perhaps we should focus on the divorce terms? The process was quick and efficient. Thomas didn't want financial revenge, just freedom. The house would be sold and proceeds split. Retirement funds would be divided according to state law. There was no custody to discuss. The kids were adults and had already made it clear, in painful phone calls, that they were deeply disappointed in their mother. What about the furniture? The photos? Abigail asked, her voice small. Keep whatever you want, Thomas replied. I'm starting over. I don't want anything that reminds me of what we lost. Thomas. I still love you. He finally looked directly into her eyes. No, you don't. You love what I represented, security, stability, someone who adored you unconditionally. But real love doesn't do what you did. Real love doesn't deliberately destroy the person it's supposed to love. I can change. I already have. Richard dumped me, did you know? When the scandal broke, he said I wasn't worth the trouble. But you've always been different. You've always truly loved me. Loved, Thomas gently corrected. I loved the woman you were. But that woman died when you opened that robe and announced you were going to Paris with another man. What you are now? I don't know. And I don't want to. Abigail broke down, sobbing in a way that might have moved Thomas months ago. Now, he just signed the papers, one after another, freeing himself from a weight he'd carried too long. One more thing, Robert said, sliding a final document forward. My client is requesting that you change gyms and avoid places he frequents. It's not a restraining order, just a request that you both move on without awkward encounters. You can't do that. That gym is my territory. It was our territory, Thomas said. Just like our marriage, our house, our life. You chose to destroy it all. Now we live with the consequences. When everything was signed and witnessed, Abigail made one last attempt. She stood, approached Thomas, placed her hand on his arm. I've been thinking a lot. About us, about who we were. Remember when we'd dance in the kitchen for no reason? When we'd watch old movies late into the night? When you said I was your best friend? Her voice cracked. Where did those people go? Thomas gently removed her hand from his arm. You killed them, Abigail. When you chose vanity over love, when you traded a real life for an empty fantasy. Those people don't exist anymore. He left the office without looking back. Outside, the sun was shining for the first time in weeks. Thomas took a deep breath, feeling the air fill his lungs, feeling alive in a way he hadn't in months. His phone rang. Lucas. Dad? How'd it go? It's over, Thomas replied, surprised by the lightness in his own voice. Finally over. You okay? Thomas considered the question. Was he hurt? Yes. Betrayed? Absolutely. But he was also free. Free from constant anxiety, unfair comparisons, the feeling of never being enough for a woman who'd never be satisfied. I am, he said, realizing it was true. I'm better than I've been in a long time. That night, in his new apartment, Thomas unlocked his guitar case and played for the first time in years. The songs were old, from before Abigail, but they sounded new somehow. They sounded hopeful. Through the window, he could see the city lighting up, thousands of lives unfolding at once. Somewhere out there, Abigail was probably staring at her reflection, trying to find in that perfect image something worth what she'd lost. Thomas knew she never would. Because a mirror can reflect the surface, but it never shows the emptiness inside. And Abigail, in her quest to become extraordinary in others' eyes, had lost the one thing that truly mattered, being extraordinary in the eyes of the one who truly loved her. He strummed the guitar strings, letting the music fill the small apartment. It was a modest beginning, but it was his. And for the first time in years, Thomas Morrison looked toward the future and smiled. Vanity had taken his wife. But it wouldn't take his soul. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.
Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Sophie had always been the kind of person who drew attention wherever she went. She had vibrant energy, always laughing loudly, hugging everyone, speaking with enthusiasm, and gesturing as if every sentence needed a personal touch to be understood. Marcus, who was more reserved, watched all this with a mix of admiration and discomfort. At the beginning of their relationship, he found her spontaneity charming. He thought it was lovely that she was open with people, welcoming, and outgoing. But over time, certain behaviors started to bother him, and he began wondering whether her manner was just friendliness, or if it hid something more. At parties, she made a point of dancing with everyone, often getting too close to his friends, touching their shoulders, arms, even chests with far too much familiarity. Marcus tried to let it go, telling himself it was just her way. But there was one detail: Sophie never acted like that with women. Only with men. It was almost as if she sought that kind of attention. He noticed the look some men exchanged with her, the lingering smiles, the touches held a few seconds longer than necessary. It wasn't just a relaxed style anymore, it felt like provocation disguised as friendliness. He decided to talk to her once, at home, after a party where she'd danced with one of his co-workers, laughing at everything the man said while touching his tie and whispering something in his ear. Marcus didn't make a scene, he simply waited until they were alone and carefully told her he felt uncomfortable with certain behaviors. He said he understood she was spontaneous but that there were limits. Sophie stopped smiling for a moment, frowned as if she didn't understand what he was saying, then burst out laughing. She called Marcus insecure, told him he needed to relax and that he was getting old before his time. She ended by saying he should feel proud to have such a desirable wife. That response hurt. He didn't say anything else that day. What was meant to be a conversation about boundaries turned into humiliation disguised as a joke. And it happened again, more than once. Marcus started noticing that every time he raised an issue, she flipped the situation around, mocked him, and dismissed his feelings as if they were nonsense. Over time, he stopped bringing things up. He kept it all to himself. But even in silence, the wounds kept piling up. Because every public joke she made, every comparison she drew between him and other men, every criticism of their simple lifestyle, it all slowly eroded the foundation of their relationship. Sophie never liked their modest life. She was always comparing them to the couples at her workplace. She said she deserved more, that she'd married a good man, but one who'd settled. Sometimes she spoke as if marrying someone who earned less than she'd hoped was a sacrifice. Marcus worked hard and always had job stability, but in her eyes, he'd never been ambitious. He preferred saving for the future and building things gradually, while Sophie wanted quick results, luxury, and status. Once, she even said she felt like she was living with a college roommate, not a husband. It happened during an argument about the car he drove, a simple but reliable sedan that she called a rusty old can. And as if all that weren't enough, there was that day in the supermarket parking lot. Marcus had left work early and decided to stop by the store to buy ingredients and cook dinner. It was a small gesture, but he liked surprising her this way, even though he rarely got any gratitude for it. When he parked, he saw a woman in a light-colored blouse leaning against a black car in the distance. He recognized the posture. He approached carefully and realized it was Sophie. She was with a man he'd never seen before. The guy stood way too close, smiling as he spoke, and at one point, placed his hand on her waist. It wasn't a casual gesture, it was confident, intimate. The kind of touch a man only makes when he's sure he can. And the most striking thing was her face. Sophie smiled in a way Marcus had never seen before, a light, enchanted smile. It cut through him like a blade. He stood there for a few seconds. No one saw him. He didn't make a scene or go up to them. He just watched. He took a deep breath and returned to his car without going into the store. In that moment, a decision began forming inside him. He didn't feel anger. He felt a quiet sadness, the kind that comes from accepting a truth that's been there all along but has only now taken shape. Their marriage, as it stood, was a prison disguised as commitment. He'd endured criticism, disdain, and contempt, and now, with his own eyes, he'd witnessed the kind of attention Sophie gave others but never him. That night, Marcus stayed silent. They ate dinner as usual, she scrolling through her phone, he watching her. The only difference was that, inside, he was already gone. Something in him had changed forever. And for the first time, he started thinking maybe his biggest mistake in life hadn't been his patience or lack of ambition, but holding on so tightly to being enough for someone who only saw his flaws. The idea of leaving was still just a seed. But once planted, he knew, it would grow. And when the time came, Sophie wouldn't even realize what she'd lost, until it was too late. During dinner, Sophie barely disguised the disdain in her voice. She fiddled with her utensils as if sharing the table with Marcus were a favor. She said she felt wasted beside him, that every day reminded her how much she'd settled. She joked about their quiet life and her unfulfilled dreams, as if Marcus were to blame for each one staying on paper. Then she came right out and said she regretted getting married. If she could go back, she'd have chosen someone more ambitious, more fun, more exciting. The word hung in the air a second too long. Marcus looked at her, fork still in hand. Sophie stared back, waiting for a reaction, maybe a plea or an outburst. But all she heard was, "Wish granted." What she took as sarcasm was, in fact, exactly how Marcus had been feeling for a while. He finished eating in silence, got up from the table, and went to the bedroom. Sophie stayed there, muttering under her breath about how cold and predictable he was, and how he wasn't even good for a proper fight. She assumed, as always, that he'd let the argument cool down, try talking later, and eventually give in. It was the usual cycle. But that night, the cycle broke. While she showered, Marcus took off his wedding ring and put it in one of the small toolboxes he used. Then he grabbed a suitcase and packed only the essentials, some clothes, documents, his favorite books, and his laptop. He left behind everything that was no longer useful to him, including the hope that their marriage could still be saved. When Sophie came out of the bathroom in her pajamas, he was lying on the couch with his eyes closed. She made a sarcastic comment about him sleeping there as if he were the offended party. He didn't respond. He just stayed quiet, as if he were no longer really in that room. As soon as dawn broke, Marcus got up, put the suitcase in the car, locked the door, and left. Sophie was still asleep. She thought she'd wake up to another ordinary day, with a husband still willing to listen, try to fix things, and stretch their relationship with bitter words and forced apologies. But Marcus had left without fanfare, without a note, without one last argument. And he took with him the car she'd always looked down on, the same one she'd been embarrassed to drive with her friends, calling it something for people with no vision. It was registered in his name, and now it was with him. Marcus went straight to Brandon's place, an old friend who'd offered help more than once. Brandon opened the door and didn't need any explanations. Marcus's look said it all. He offered the guest room and a cup of coffee. Marcus accepted and sat down. For the first time in a long while, he felt like air was finally flowing freely in his chest again. The tension he'd carried in his shoulders was gone. No yelling, no demands, no jokes about his salary or what he wore. Just silence, a silence that didn't hurt, but comforted. In the hours that followed, Marcus started mentally organizing what came next. He'd already made his decision, now he needed to act. He picked up the phone, called a lawyer Brandon had recommended, and scheduled a consultation. During the call, the lawyer explained that since he and Sophie had never officially registered their marriage at the courthouse and had only lived together in an unregistered common-law union, Marcus wasn't legally required to split assets or pay alimony under the state's common-law marriage statutes, and in that particular state, the lack of formal registration nullified any property claims. Afterward, he logged into his bank account and closed their joint account. Sophie had left everything in his hands, including their finances. She'd trusted him to keep things running, as he always had. But now he no longer had any obligation to support the comfort of someone who humiliated him. And right then, Marcus understood what it truly meant to take back control of his own life. It wasn't about punishing Sophie, it was about protecting himself from her. That same day, he also sent an email to his company's HR department requesting vacation time, which gave him the space he needed to organize his move. Meanwhile, Sophie woke up, stretched, and went about her routine without noticing his absence. She found it odd he wasn't in the kitchen but assumed he'd left early. She checked her phone, posted an old photo with a filter and an ambiguous caption, and headed to work. When she got back, she noticed the car wasn't in the garage and thought that a bit strange. She sent him a message, no reply. That night, she called, straight to voicemail. She sent another, sharper text. Nothing. She spent the night scrolling through her phone, switching between social media and notifications. She fell asleep thinking he'd be back the next day. Meanwhile, Marcus slept better than he had in years. He didn't wake up in the middle of the night replaying unresolved arguments. He didn't dream of unlikely reconciliations. The peace he'd searched for within the marriage, he found outside it. And strangely enough, he didn't miss her. He felt lightness. Brandon, without asking many questions, helped him with everything. That night, the two of them sat together, had a beer, and laughed about old college stories. Marcus started tasting things again. He started hearing his own voice without the constant echo of criticism. He hadn't left on impulse. The decision hadn't been born at dinner. It had matured slowly over months of silence, of disdain disguised as jokes, of cold touches pretending to be intimacy. And when it finally took shape, he didn't need to shout or beg. He just acted. He left the same way he'd entered, with dignity. And that, more than any reply Sophie could give, would be the greatest lesson of all. Because when someone who's always been peaceful decides to walk away, it's because they've fought far more than you ever realized. Sophie still believed Marcus would come back. At first, she treated his silence as part of his pride, something temporary. She told a few friends her husband was playing the offended one, and that soon, as always, he'd show up with an apology and maybe a gift, trying to fix something she didn't even think was broken. She hadn't understood a thing. She was so wrapped up in her own vanity that she didn't realize Marcus's silence was a final answer. The truth started sinking in when she tried to pay for her salon appointment and her card was declined. She called the bank and was told the account had been closed and Marcus had transferred the remaining funds to another account solely in his name. She hung up irritated, thinking it must be a mistake. She tried another card, same result. Her phone started buzzing with payment notifications. The apartment rent was overdue. Subscriptions to services she used regularly had been cancelled. All at once. Overnight, the comfortable structure Marcus had sustained for years vanished as if it had never existed. She went to Marcus's boss, wanting to know if he still worked there. She found out he'd resigned days earlier. She reached out to his parents but got short, cold replies. Marcus had asked them to respect his space and not share any information about his whereabouts. For the first time, Sophie felt exposed and vulnerable. She realized she was alone. And that the person she thought she controlled had actually left long ago, with far more dignity than she'd ever imagined. Weeks dragged on. Without access to accounts or stability, Sophie started selling her designer clothes and shoes to cover basic debts. She tried to keep up appearances on social media, posting old photos with generic captions, feeding the illusion that everything was under control. But outside her phone, reality was different. The real estate agency called often. The landlord began threatening legal action. Those friends she used to laugh with and make cruel comparisons about had disappeared. It was as if she'd stopped being useful. One night, while searching for any sign of Marcus on social media, she discovered he'd deactivated all his accounts. She checked her old phone contacts and saw Brandon's name. She decided to call, but went straight to voicemail. She sent a message and was ignored. For the first time, Sophie began to understand the weight of being disregarded. Only now, she was the target. She started wandering the apartment's hallways with a lost look, opening empty cabinets as if searching for clues to explain what had happened. But all she found was the silence she herself had built over the years. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Marcus woke early and organized his routine with precision. He'd secured a small investment to start a sustainable architecture consultancy with Brandon, a project he'd always wanted to bring to life but never had encouragement for at home. Sophie used to say those alternative ideas wouldn't pay bills and that he should focus on getting promoted, wearing better clothes, impressing his bosses. But now, away from the voice that diminished him, Marcus began to flourish. He met his first clients with enthusiasm, and in between, studied new techniques, wrote articles, and gradually became a local reference in his field. Sophie, on the other hand, had to leave the apartment after receiving a formal eviction notice. She tried renting another place, but her credit was flagged. The only person who took her in was a distant cousin she'd never been close to. She slept on a mattress on the floor of the back bedroom, embarrassed, saying it was just temporary until she sorted things out with Marcus. But Marcus didn't respond to any of her emails or calls. Her messages started with sarcasm, then turned to pleas, then to desperate begging. Nothing got a reply. The block wasn't on the phone, it was emotional. She ended up taking a job as a receptionist at a used car dealership. The salary covered basics and helped her cousin with expenses. It was ironic. Every day, she greeted customers interested in vehicles that, years earlier, she would have called ridiculous. And every time she saw a car similar to Marcus's parked out front, her stomach twisted. It was as if the universe had chosen that exact scenario to remind her of what she'd lost. 2 years passed since that last conversation with the lawyer. The sustainable architecture consultancy Marcus had started with Brandon grew faster than they'd imagined. What began with small projects and local clients became a recognized name in innovation and energy efficiency. They landed a contract with a boutique hotel chain, and the business was featured in specialized magazines. Marcus, now leading his own team, started getting invited to speak at universities and corporate events. He earned well, but more importantly, he felt proud of what he built every day. With the profits, he bought a new house in a quiet, upscale neighborhood, a modern 2-story home with a garden, solar panels, and a studio upstairs where he liked sketching new designs. He also fulfilled an old dream: he bought the sports car he'd always admired. One ordinary afternoon, he parked at the supermarket to buy ingredients for dinner. He'd promised to cook for a couple of friends coming to see his new place. As he pulled into a spot, he noticed someone walking toward the parking lot. Sophie was leaving the store, carrying a reusable bag with just a few groceries. Her distracted expression changed when a high-end sports car approached the lot, the kind of car that had always caught her eye: bold design, flawless paint, imposing presence. She slowed down, curious, almost hypnotized. Only when she focused on the driver did her eyes widen. The face behind the wheel was familiar, far too familiar. It was Marcus. More confident, better groomed, nothing like the man she used to belittle without remorse. When Marcus got out, she stared in shock. She looked thinner, worn down, but seeing him, she forced a smile. She walked up to him as if meeting an old acquaintance. She didn't use her old sarcastic tone or raise her voice. She pretended to be surprised, complimented the car, said the metallic color looked gorgeous. She made a comment about how time flew and how great he looked. She flirted with every gesture, as if years of contempt had simply evaporated. Marcus looked at her for a moment. There was no anger. No longing. Just a faint memory of who she once was. He adjusted himself, gave a slight smile, and said, "I hope you're doing well. Take care." He walked into the supermarket with the calm of someone who'd learned to close chapters without needing to prove anything anymore. She stood there for a few seconds, watching him walk away, feeling the full weight of everything she'd let slip through her fingers. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.